the process of writing this book kind of changed my life in many ways. And I remember a lot of it had to do with some of the initial research that I did. When with Some Great Thing, I remember it was about a plasterer, and I got to a point where I realized I have to meet other people whose trades, whose trade is plastering, before I can write any further. And the Fall was, in my mind, partly about international relations. I don't think anybody ever picked up on the fact that it's about international relations, but so subtle is my mind. And I got to a point where I thought, I've got to write about, I have to meet diplomats, I have to meet people in embassies, I have to meet people at the U.S. Embassy, all this sort of thing. And I could go forward from that. And with this one, it's about chimpanzees. And I got to a point where I thought I really have to meet a chimpanzee. And then I thought, well, how the fuck do I do that? And it turned out that 15 minutes from my apartment in Montreal, where I was living at the time, was a sanctuary where chimpanzees lived. And it ended up being easier than the other two novels in terms of that sort of research. And I had these very sort of meaningful meetings with these chimps. And one day I remember I found myself playing catch with a chimpanzee named Binky, and Binky was one of a number of chimps who had suffered a host of indignities, and they were all kind of miracles of survival. And the least of their indignities, I think, was their names. Binky probably conjures an idea of a sort of bichon frisé that you can pat in your lap or something like that. Binky in reality was an 18-year-old who was over 200 pounds and was surging towards a sort of body full of manhood and scared the hell out of me. And here I was throwing an apple back and forth with this guy, and he was effectively standing in his bedroom. There was an iron sort of grid between us, and he was throwing an apple to me. I was throwing an apple to him, and I caught myself at halfway through that thinking I'm playing catch with a chimpanzee. This is kind of amazing. But the game became a bit more frantic quickly enough, and he changed his movements and his noises and threw the apple a little harder, and then at one point just let the apple fall, and I was just so in awe of this guy, and basically, it's like being in the presence of a bully in a way. It's like he just made me respect him immediately with his physical presence. And the apple fell, and as I bent down to sort of, here, let me get that for you, sir. I stood up, and he had swallowed half a bottle of water, or not swallowed, put it in his mouth, and sent it flying at my face as I stood up, and I had come that day bringing gifts. I brought Gatorade. They love Gatorade. I brought beer. I sat down and drank a beer with a couple of them. And Binky had already had a bottle of Gatorade, and he wanted more. And when I was sort of soaking wet, one of the people who worked at the place said, I think you want some more Gatorade. And we got him a bottle of Gatorade, and once he got that, he was delighted, and sort of for emphasis, he picked up the half bottle of water that he had spat at me and winged it at my head. And to sort of step back from that for a second, what happened that day and on many days at that place, and hundreds of days as I read about chimpanzees, was this sort of realization where if you sort of unpack that moment, here was this individual who saw what he wanted, knew what he wanted, and knew that there was this other individual who could provide that for him. And then there was a third party, and his struggle was to communicate his desire to get that thing. And first it began with play, and then it escalated and became more desperate. And when he finally got what he wanted, he reasserted his authority by dinging the water bottle at my head. I think as I stood there sort of humiliated, I also stood there with open eyes thinking all the stuff that I'd read to that point about our genetic and immunological relationship with chimpanzees is there in a nutshell. I've been thinking about human life since those times as ape life, as an interplay between individuals wanting something and other individuals either arbitrating or providing. And I know that from my kids in the sandbox, and I know that in the publishing world, I know that in politics, I know it at every level of life, and we don't seem to have this language or this ability to comfortably look at that stuff. And so I think this book came out of that, and for me, it's a factual account of a number of true stories about chimps, how they are, and how humans have interacted with them over the years. I thought that here is the making of an epic story,